Welcome to Sabbath Vespers. I'm Nerida Taylor Bates, the president of the Association of Adventist Women. We're in the middle of starting a Vespers series on finding purpose in uncertain times. And I'm really excited about bringing it to you this way. I get to say hi to my cousin in Orange, Australia. Hi, Marion. And my friend Hildy in the Arctic in Norway. And you, welcome. As Christians, we know that God has promised us a purpose. And to be honest, I feel comfortable saying that I'm an educator and a healer. But when it comes to saying I'm a leader, I feel a little bit uncomfortable. That's why I'm excited about listening to our speaker today, Dr. Linda Becker. You may know Linda as a vice president of Union College and an educator in the field of leadership. But at the Association of Adventist Women, we know Linda as a friend and past president. Following Dr. Becker's talk, we'll have a panel that's led by Dr. Ella Simmons. Dr. Simmons is a vice president at the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, and she's been there since 2005. Before that, she was a provost at La Sierra University, a vice president at Oakwood University, and an associate dean at University of Louisville. We're so looking forward to spending some time with you, and when our program's done, we'd like to keep the conversation going. If you have some observations or questions, leave them in the comments below, and we have a link so that you can send us a video answering the question, are you a leader? How or why not? Let's bow our heads for prayer. Dear God, thank you so much for preparing us for our purpose. Please be with women all around the globe as we try to serve you best. Especially be with those women for whom leadership is a subversive act. Let them know that we see them and that you are near them. Please steady the ground under our feet in these uncertain times and help us to rest assured that you know the future. Amen.
Guerrier. I am a pastor and a chaplain. The question was posed to me, are you a leader? And my answer is yes. I am a leader because I have the ability to sympathize and empathize with others. I have the ability to cast a vision and rally the troops so that we can all work together towards a same goal and a better future. I have the ability to really understand how people work and what the different dynamics are and how I can motivate people to bring out of them the best possible, excellent option. And I am a praying woman. I know that nothing gets done without prayer. And so for that and so many other things, I will say yes, I am a leader.
I am a leader not because I'm a small business owner, but because I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend. All of those roles make me a leader because I'm always strategizing, coming up with a game plan, praying for someone, giving thoughtful advice, listening, watching, learning, and constantly finding solutions to problems.
Welcome to the first virtual Association of Adventist Women annual conference. My name is Isabel Leon, and I'm a past officer of AAW. I want to thank our present officers team for their ability to practice leadership, as John Maxwell, international expert on leadership, states. And further, I will also take the liberty to quote a couple of great phrases from several of Dr. Maxwell's books throughout my brief presentation. A few months ago, Association President Nerida Bates was at my home as we worked on some transitional needs. During the course of the conversation, I mentioned to her about a great revelation I had about my personal style of leadership. So she asked if I could share that with you today. Maxwell says, no matter who you are, you can lead and lead well. And each of us is a person of influence. I believe that firmly. However, I see that there are different styles of leadership. Those that are comfortable with public speaking and or bearing the title of president, carrying the success of the organization on their shoulders, etc. I call that frontline leadership. Then there are those of us who would rather lead from behind. Both are extremely powerful and necessary. Another quote states, leaders are persons of influence. I believe women are wired to lead and are very much influential. Does your talent or gift lie in frontline leadership and enjoy public speaking, being president, etc.? Or are you comfortable leading from behind as I do? Maybe your gift or talent is in graphic design, to compose the many marketing pieces we need. Maybe you are a great flower designer that can help us with decorations for events, etc. A good letter writer. You're good with finances. You enjoy using the phone and speaking with people, doing some research on our events, planning, executing, minute taking, event planning, putting together catering menus for events. AAW has room for all of our styles and talents. Leaders are agents of change. And remember that this is why AA exists, to make a difference in this chaotic world of ours. Matthew 28:19 gives us the great command, go therefore and teach all nations. The goal of the association has always been, and will continue to be, to support women in ministry and to address the many needs of today's women. If you are interested in participating in this type of leadership, please go to our website at www.associationofadventistwomen.com and let us know where your interest in leadership lies. God bless.
I was asked to address the question of whether or not I saw myself as a leader. And I guess I do. I'm an educator. I'm in the front of the room, leading a class discussion or leading workshops, so I'm in the front. But what does leadership mean? For me, it's about empowering the people with whom you're working. So in the classroom, it's about empowering my students. It's about having humility so that you can hear what they need to learn. And it's about advocating for truth.
Dear Lord, I want to be a leader for you. You have promised to be with us. I want my power to show in peace that passes understanding.
Who is Malala? Was the question the gunman asked on that fateful day. This young Pakistani girl, age 15, who decided she wanted an education, was on her way home from school. Her father was an educator, and she lived in the Swat Valley, a unique region in Pakistan. This particular region had had schools for almost 20 years that boys and girls could attend who wanted an education. And many of the girls in this valley realized that getting an education was the only way out of the poverty that most Pakistanis experienced at that point in time. So Malala and her friends were at school to study. At this particular time, the Taliban had actually lost their grip on the valley and things were starting to normalize. But one day, the Taliban sent a message to all of this region saying that schooling for women had to stop immediately. Her father talked to the officials in the government and they tried to decide what to do. The government assured them that they could provide the security that they needed. So these girls continued to go to school. And on this particular day, they were leaving school. They got in the bus that they usually did to go home and had gotten only 100 yards out of the schoolyard when the gunman stuck his head in the bus and said, "Who is Malala?" Her frightened friends looked at her and that's all he needed to know who his target was. He shot her in the head and fled. There was immediate terror that gripped the hearts of all the people around that particular bus in the schoolyard at that point in time. They airlifted Malala to Peshawar, to a hospital, because she was critically injured. The bullet had actually gone into her brain and down her neck. They were able to do immediate surgery there, but she needed better medical care, so they took her to Islamabad. And by a miraculous event, a group of British physicians were there. They also treated her, but they realized she was going to need additional help. So she was flown to Birmingham, where she received treatment, and miraculously, she recovered. And she not only recovered, but she had full facility of her thinking and of her speaking. And she was able to communicate very well. And so it happened that as on July 12th, at age 16, she addressed the United Nations Youth Assembly, and she stated those now famous words as she stood before them: "One child, one teacher, one book, one pen can change the world." We all know Malala made an incredible contribution to the cause of education for women around the world. Former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown put it this way: because of Malala, there's a public understanding of what is wrong and what needs to be done. She's pretty sanguine about the criticism that comes her way. She says it's all right that they express their feelings, and it's my right to say what I want. I want to do something for education. That's my only desire. What courage, what strength, what an impact. She has received the Nobel Peace Prize. Good afternoon. I'm Linda Becker, talking to you from Lincoln, Nebraska. It's an honor and a joy to be with you virtually this afternoon with Adventist women leaders around the world to talk about leading in uncertain times. What a blessing to have technology that we can connect with and that we can have this visit with. And it's my prayer that it will be something that will encourage and unite us all wherever we're viewing from today. You and I have never lived in the times like the present. There's never been a global pandemic, fires burning and raging in various areas, hurricanes beating on the coasts, an economy that's sagging, racial tensions that are ready to explode. The intersection of all these world events call for courageous leadership, guided by strong values that gives hope. And we want to be clear today, as we start our conversation, that we need both men and women leaders. We also need good leaders. We want to see today if there's any qualities about women that could make them great leaders in these chaotic times. Where do great leaders and courageous leaders come from? There's a favorite story of mine. It's about an orphan girl. This orphan girl was raised by her uncle, and she finds herself included in a group of women being considered to be queen of a country. She was shocked to find herself in such a situation. She doesn't have a hope of a great future. She's alone, a foreigner. She doesn't have connections. She doesn't have a great education. She hasn't even received special training in any area. She is beautiful, and she has a belief in her God. Her trust in her God is complete, and she believes that He's going to lead her through this experience. This orphan girl we know as Esther. She finds favor with Haggai, the chief eunuch, as soon as she enters the harem. He gives her special spa treatments and allows her beauty rest. And there's something so very courageous and likable about Esther that King Xerxes recognizes it as soon as he meets her. He decides to make her the queen. He holds a banquet for her and invites all of the notables to the realm. About this time, Haman becomes the highest noble in the kingdom. He is furious that Mordecai does not bow to him when he passes. He knows that Mordecai is a Jew and decides that because these foreigners are difficult to deal with and that they are different than his people, they don't obey all the king's laws, and doing away with all of them is the way to deal with Mordecai. He convinces the king to sign a decree to kill all the Jews on the 13th day of Adar, in the 12th month of Adar. And this is where our story really becomes interesting. Mordecai goes to the king's gate dressed in sackcloth. Esther learns that he's there dressed in unbecoming clothing. She sends him a suit of clothing, which he refuses to wear. But he gives her servant a copy of the decree that Naaman has written and tells her that all of her people will be killed unless something is done. And he asks her to intervene with the king. Esther sent back word to Haman that she had not been called to the king for 30 days, and that to go to him without invitation would probably mean her death. To which Haman responded that she would be probably killed anyway if nothing happened. And then he asked her the question that is so important for each of us today. And who knows but what you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther thought about all of this, the conflicting pieces of information and the puzzle that there was part of this decision-making process. And she told Mordecai to have all of the Jews pray and fast for 3 days. She said her maids would fast and pray for the same 3 days. And at the end of the time, she would go to the king. And if I perish, I perish. She was willing to give her life for her people. She believed that God had a purpose in all of this, and she was willing to do her part, the ultimate sacrifice of her life to help save her people. Armed with faith and courage, Esther goes before the king on the 3rd day. We know that when Esther went to see the king, he was pleased to see her. He put out his scepter, and she went to him. And what did she do? She invited him to dinner. He and Haman. The king accepted her invitation, still wondering what it was that Esther wanted. He promised her up to a half of his kingdom. And she reassured him with the words, "Please come back to dinner tomorrow night." Have you ever wondered why she paused and didn't make her request that night? Only God knows. But the king and Haman returned to her palace for dinner the next night. And we know that she then told the king all about what wicked Haman had done and the decree he had set forth, and that not only would Mordecai be killed and all of the other Jews, but that she was a Jew as well. As soon as the king realized what this impact would have, he realized his folly. And he set out another decree that the Jewish people could defend themselves on the set date for their annihilation. We are told that 75,000 Jewish enemies were killed by the Jews that day. It was a day of great celebration, of great victory. It was an incredible day. And because of that day, a Jewish holiday was set up. It's the holiday of Purim. It celebrates freedom for the Israeli people. And it's still celebrated by Jewish custom today. Esther helped save her people from annihilation. She was a leader needed at that time in that place. She had faith and courage. What about you and me? Are we called to be leaders at this time, in this place? Do we women have anything special to offer in these chaotic times? Are there unique ways that women lead that are effective in crisis? Let's take a moment to look at what's going on around us with COVID-19 crisis. Countries with women leaders have an interesting record in terms of their response to Corona-19. New Zealand, Taiwan, Germany, Finland, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland, just to name a few, have all had very unique responses to the virus. I'll share a few facts with you about how women have led recently, especially during the virus. According to the Pew Foundation, only 10% of the world leaders are women at this time. In numbers, that comes out to 15 out of 150 countries, which the United Nations recognizes. Interestingly, women have had major leadership roles at some time since 1966 in 6 of the 10 most populated countries. And I didn't know until I was doing the research for this particular talk that Bangladesh, who has a female leader right now, is the 6th most populated country in the world with 156.2 million inhabitants. So women are leading in a number of countries, but 10% of the countries as the prime leader in those countries. Interestingly, during COVID, infection rates were lower in female-led countries and fatalities are noticeably lower. In fact, fatalities as of May 19 in countries where women were the leaders were half as great per capita as they were in other countries. Female leaders ordered lockdowns early in terms of deaths, so they actually took action much quicker. They appeared to approach the crisis with a singular vision, and that is to save lives. Male leaders tended to set fatality rate and the rate of the economy for their key priorities. Even accounting for institutional context and other controls, being female-led has provided countries with an advantage in corona environment. Two women, Girapati and Karamamate, have done some research that I'm going to be quoting now, and this is effective as of May 19. What is it that has made these women leaders better during COVID? For purpose of us understanding good leadership, we're going to look at two things: their actions and their leadership qualities. What actions did they take? Number one, they took early, decisive action. They came from multi-party democracies with high levels of public trust in their government. They contained the pandemic through early scientific intervention. They implemented widespread testing, easy access to quality medical treatment, aggressive tracing, and tough restrictions on social gatherings. German Chancellor Angela Merkel holds a doctorate in quantum chemistry, and she used a rational approach, even telling her people about the Rho factor. Her speech has gone viral. Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister of New Zealand, shut the borders and ordered a 4-week lockdown immediately. Sanna Marin did similar things in Finland. She is only 34 years old and has an 85% approval rating. The data shows us that gender equity is critical to global public health, to safety, and to international security. We have squeezed women into 25% of leadership space, 1/4, both in physical decision-making rooms and in the stories we tell about our lives. 1/4 is not enough, UN Women Executive Director Fumi Mababo says. I'm suggesting today that gender equity is essential to spreading the gospel and sharing the good news. As Ruth Bader Ginsburg so aptly stated, women belong in all the places where decisions are being made. What implications does that quote have for our church and our administration? I'll leave that thought with you for a moment. What leadership qualities have these women in the world around us exhibited? There are several. They have been deliberative. They are affecting our current world crisis as thoughtful, intentional, and deliberate leaders who take action after considering what is happening. Ernest Solberg of Norway has even developed a children's program where she helps them through the pandemic. She has developed songs. She has developed a way of listening. And she tells the children it's okay to be afraid, but that we're going to get through this together. What a foundational leadership quality of deliberateness. The other behavior that these women have exhibited is humility. Not all of these women have a doctorate in quantum chemistry like Angela Merkel, but they've all had the humility to listen to experts around them who can advise them in their responses. They each found panels of experts to advise their processes, and they were willing to learn new things at critical points. They are also each inclusive. Jacinda Ardern employs a very inclusive leadership style. Not only must they be humble, but they must listen and they must be willing to take in a diversity of voices and dialogue. In times of stress particularly, people often resort to old beliefs or their biased modes of decision-making. But solving complex problems requires considering different points of view so that leaders can make decisions that have positive impact on the collective whole. These leaders also showed decisiveness. Being willing to listen is important, but there comes a time when a leader must consider the data and the advice and then make a decision. They can't wait for perfect information, they can't wait for all the information, and they can't wait to be 100% confident that their decision is right. They have to take the best advice and data that is around them and take action on that information. To decide is not to decide in a crisis. Communicativeness The women in these countries took care to communicate clearly and effectively what they were doing and why they were doing it. Again, Chancellor Merkel gave a scientific yet concise explanation of how the coronavirus transmission works. Prime Minister Ardern has been remarkable in exhibiting all of these traits of good communication by addressing her people clearly, consistent, and compassionately. She sometimes uses FaceTime from her home after she tucks her toddler into bed at night. She sometimes visits from a van going from one appointment to another, or at other times she's in her office in a more formal setting. This kind of communication can result in something that researchers call the female trust advantage, in which women leaders are able to win more trust in some crisis situations due to their interpersonal skills. These leaders have also exhibited empathy. After the tragic shooting incident in a Muslim mosque in Christchurch, Jacinda, dressed in a hijab as she visited the mosque, she hugged the women and men who were mourning their family members' loss, and she was sensitive to what they were experiencing. The New Zealand government paid for the burials of all the shooting victims of that particular attack, and there were 50 of those victims. During this pandemic, Jacinda has initiated a Be Kind refrain, which fueled a spirit of altruism in the country, inspiring many acts of charity. Empathetic and compassionate leaders perform better, inspire more loyalty, engagement, and productivity than other types of leaders. It has taken a global pandemic for us to see some of the unique qualities of leadership women contribute. We don't want to say that all women leaders have done well, nor do we want to say that all male leaders have not done well. What we do want to consider is that there are some unique qualities that women have displayed that are very effective in this crisis. Leaders with empathy, compassion, and ability to show support, skills that women leaders tend to exhibit more than men, have been vital to our current pandemic. We don't need to wait for a crisis to afford women the opportunity to lead. There are several other leadership qualities that women have shown during the pandemic. They value the collective well-being. They have taken a more rational approach to their leadership. They have taken a more relational approach to their leadership, and this relational style focuses on building trust, alleviating fears, and managing the crisis at hand. Research has consistently shown that women adopt a more transformational leadership style, which includes demonstrating compassion, care, concern, respect, and equity. Women have also been shown to live their values and to be more willing to confront problems and corruption. Brené Brown talks about this so well. Living our values means that we do more than profess our values, we practice them. We walk our talk. We are clear about what we believe and hold important. We take care that our intentions, words, thoughts, and behaviors align with those beliefs. When we live our values, we live with integrity. We choose courage over comfort. We choose what's right over what's fun or easy. And it's practicing our values, not just professing them. It means we cannot choose silence over what is right. We need to stand up and speak out for our beliefs in caring and thoughtful ways. We don't sit silently while someone dehumanizes or marginalizes another. We show up for people in pain, and we don't look away. Faith and courage take a lot of work, and it's something we women are used to doing. One of our church's founding women leaders encouraged women to be involved in ministry and to lead with this following message. Select women who act with earnest part. The Lord will use intelligent women in the work of teaching. And let none feel that these women who understand the word and who have ability to teach should not receive remuneration for their labors. There's a great work for women to do in the cause of the present truth. Through the exercise of womanly tact and wise use of their knowledge of the Bible truth, they can remove difficulties that our brethren cannot meet. We need women to work, to labor, and we should encourage those who wish to engage in this line of missionary effort. Ellen G. White, letter 142, quoted in Evangelism on page 491. This wise leader of our church realized that women have unique gifts of leadership and ministry, and that women are needed in church leadership today. In his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, Ibram Kendi relates the events surrounding the formation of the Combahee River Collective, named for the Combahee River slave raid of 1863, led by Harriet Tubman. In 1977, a group of Black women in Boston wrote a statement of freedom. They did not want Black women to be viewed as inferior or superior to any other group. Quote, "To be recognized as human, levelly human, is enough." These women went on to say that they shared a belief that Black women are inherently valuable. Such truth. These women found a voice in describing themselves as levelly human and valuable. Do you and I believe that we are levelly human and valuable? God has made each of us unique with certain skills and traits, passions and perspectives. We are made uniquely for a reason and a purpose and for a place in time. The Gallup organization researches talent, and they have found that each one of us has a talent that is better than 1,000 other people. The hockey goalie sees a puck differently than you and I do. He sees it frame by frame, like an old movie, where I just see a blur. He is able to stop that puck because of what he sees. The really interesting piece of this research that they do shows that when we're working out of our strengths, we are happier, more positive, and more effective. And as Frederick Buechner put it, the place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. In the leadership classes that I teach, we talk about our leader shape. Some of us feel comfortable doing experiments in a lab or administrating a university, shepherding a church or conducting research, giving speeches and being up front, conducting a choir or leading a discussion, cooking for the homeless or listening to a friend, or being a mother who's cuddling her children. All of these types are types of leadership. Being a mother is being a leader. Being a Christian is being a leader. You and I each have an opportunity to be the good news in unique and dynamic ways when we listen to the gifts God has given us and use them for Him. I have no idea what door He is opening for you, but I know that He's made you uniquely different to fill a very special space, to make this world a better place at this very time. He wants each of us to step out with courage and faith, and when we live our values, we face the odds with strength and courage. We have value, we add value that the world needs right now. Please see your incredible value in God's eyes and know that He will inspire your life with courage and the faith that you need for uncertain times. We don't know what the future holds in these uncertain times, but we know the end of the story. We know that leading in these uncertain times is going to take a gift we each have. And we know that these gifts are unique. We can also see that women have a major contribution to make with our collaborative style, our deliberative humility, our inclusiveness, our decisiveness, our communicativeness, and our empathy. Who knows but what thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? This is not just a question posed to Esther. It's a statement made by God saying, of course, you and I have come to this time, this place, this courtroom, this pulpit, this classroom, this boardroom, this writing table, this church, this home, this dinner table, this crisis situation that we are living in for such a time as this. My prayer is that we can each be the humans, the leaders, the women God made us to be, and that we will be at our best through these uncertain times because we know who walks with us and we know who is leading us. So many of you inspire me. You are leading in dynamic ways. We at the Association of Adventist Women would like to hear your stories. It would encourage other women to lead in the ways God has gifted them to lead. Would you be willing to tell your story of how you're leading on a 2 or 3 minute video clip? If so, please send that clip to AAW at the address on the screen. May God bless.
Hello, I am Ella Simmons. On the panel with us today, we have a fine team of seriously experienced and wise women to share with us. I will introduce them, each one beginning with Olive J. Hemmings, who is Professor of Religion and Ethics at Washington Adventist University. She has been preparing ministers for the field since 1983, many of whom, she says, are now conference and union executives, and some are theology professors following in her footsteps. She says, over the years, many have come to my classes believing women should not have clerical authority. Then she says, none have graduated believing the same. I can take that more than one way, Olive. Dr. Hemmings pursues a yearly itinerary of teaching and preaching nationally and internationally, and serves effectively on some of the church's highest education boards. She holds a master's degree in New Testament and biblical languages from Andrews University, Andrea, and a PhD in theology, ethics, and culture from Claremont Graduate University in Claremont, California. Welcome, Olive.
Thank you very much, Ella.
Next, we have Andrea Luxton, who, as we know, is president of Andrews University, and she says, a teacher at heart. This is the third time Andrea has been the first female president of an institution. First Newbold College, and then Canadian University College, which is now Burman University. And now she is president at Andrews University. And as I was thinking about your first, Andrea, I also wondered, are you the only? Sometimes, sadly, that is the case. Andrea's first degree was a Bachelor's of Arts in Theology and English from Newbold College. And then she earned a Master's of Arts in English from Andrews University, and then a PhD in English from the Catholic University of America. She has greatly enjoyed working in the church environment at the union and general conference level, where today she participates in decision-making for the World Church. She says she sought in all her career to build capacity in both churches and schools, universities particularly, to develop committed, passionate, and faithful disciples. And welcome, Andrea. And then we have Helen Staples-Evans, who is Senior Vice President of Patient Care Services for Loma Linda University Health. She is a native of South Africa. She has held roles throughout the organization there at Loma Linda for over 30 years, including Chief Nursing Officer at Loma Linda University Children's Hospital, Executive Director of Staff Development, and an instructor for various specialties in the School of Nursing. She has also worked as a nurse in London and in the Southern Africa country of Lesotho, that small country. She holds a Doctor of Nursing practice and a master's degree from Loma Linda University School of Nursing, as well as bachelor's degree from Cape Town University. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you, Ella.
And I know for sure, all of us, the four of us, in one way or another, cross paths in leadership in the church. I serve on a quality committee at Loma Linda University with Helen. I serve on an international board of ministerial and theological education with Olive, and I serve on the General Conference Executive Committee and International Board of Education with Andrea. So, ladies, you know a lot about leadership. You have studied, but more than that, I believe the audience heard the 30 years here and the many years there and there. You have experience. Earlier, we listened to a powerful presentation by Linda Becker in which she explored the differences to some degree in leadership style and I would say formation between women and men, recognizing that we need both women and men in leadership. But she pointed out some of those unique qualities that women bring to leadership in whatever form of leadership they engage. And so during our panel discussion, I'm hoping that we can explore some of those qualities, but from your own perspective. There have been hints as I looked at your biographies, but I want to hear from your heart. What do you feel those qualities, those special qualities that were mentioned, have brought to your leadership experiences? And I'm going to begin with one question that is pretty broad, and I think sort of connects to the heart of what Linda was saying, that women tend to be participatory in style. We engage in team building and supporting others. And so the first question, how do you keep a team or a community of individuals working together and performing well when everyone is experiencing a high degree of personal stress and uncertainty in times such as a worldwide COVID-19 pandemic? Let us begin, perhaps with you, Helen.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ella. Yes, it's been a challenging time. It's also been a time that I have seen the most extraordinary courage exemplified by our clinical staff, nursing staff on the front line who are at the beginning of the COVID epidemic were frightened. I mean, quite frankly, frightened about what they were taking home to their families, what the implications were for them. And I found myself really proud and humbled by their commitment and their dedication to coming into work on a daily basis. And as I'm thinking about your question, Ella, I really resonated with Linda's the principles that she outlined for leadership and the leadership qualities. The first one that she mentioned was deliberativeness. Mm-hmm. And that really resonated with me around the fear that the staff had initially. We didn't know a lot about COVID when it first struck the hospital. There was a lot of conflicting information. There still is some coming out, but there was a lot of conflicting information about what precautions we should be taking, how careful should they be, what would they be taking home, and being able to acknowledge the fear and really fear with them by being with them through that fear and acknowledging that. And then the humility to accept the reality that our rules were changing every day. So we would be sending out communications absolutely every day, changing what they were required to wear for PPE, how long they could be in a patient room, who we would be allowing to come up and visit. It changed every day. For our staff, that was incredibly confusing, incredibly challenging, and also generates sort of the idea that we don't know what we're doing, but having the humility to recognize that we are trying to respond in an agile fashion to information that's coming out that none of us really know. And so being willing to learn and have the humility to acknowledge that we're finding out new things and it is changing.
Yes.
And then that ability to have inclusiveness as well. So, and to listen to the staff. So one of the things very early on, I found that staff were very concerned about what they were taking home. So it became apparent that having scrubs, things for them to change into here at the hospital, was going to be incredibly important for them. Yes. And so working with the team to just get scrubs coming in that we would launder here, that they could change into when they got here, change out of before they left home, became very, very important for them.
I think I want to come back around to this decisiveness and inclusiveness. Let us move around to the other panelists because I don't want to lose that point. Mm-hmm. Olive, you are on a university campus.
Yes.
Are there differences between your campus and what Helen is experiencing in a hospital setting?
I find it not as complicated on my campus because what we're trying to do is to assure students that regardless of what the state requires of us, we're going to work through it and we're going to find a way to educate them.
Yes.
And that has been very effective. We prepared to open up for the fall semester with all the protocols that the state of Maryland required. And then at the last minute, our county, Montgomery County, decided we're not going to open any schools. And so quickly, we just, as it were, switched back into pure virtual gear, which we had started before. And our provost, who happens to be a lady, has been a woman, I should say, has been very supportive, very reassuring. You see no kind of stress at all when she speaks. She assures us that God is with us and it's going to be okay. And we just move back seamlessly into virtual. And I found that, I think, if I may add to that some a philosophical undergirding and perhaps a sociological one, is that women have been biologically and historically given the role of bringing into life and nurturing life.
Yes.
And so there are many things that women can put into place, many requests that they can make and demands that they can make without being threatening. There's a non-threatening, life-giving aspect of womankind that goes over. And that's why we find in those countries led by women, you find that people are more cooperative, things are put into place, and everything is orderly. And that is what women bring to the table.
Absolutely. Now, Andrea, you're on a university campus, but your campus opened. You have students.
Right, we do. And it's interesting listening to Olive speak because she is amazing in just saying, yep, we're just going to do it for the students. And that really was, from an administrative perspective, the role. All of a sudden, I've been saying over the last couple of months that the amount of decisions you make in a day now are the equivalent of what it was in a week or 2 weeks before. Yes. Everything, talk about decisiveness, everything has to be really, really quick. You've got to move. Everything is changing all the time. And I think the thing, and coming from a female perspective, and I think listening to what Helen was saying, the need to listen and understand the flashpoints for other people. Suddenly we were asking people that have taught for 35, 40 years to suddenly move to remote teaching.
Yes.
And that was scary for them. It's a completely new world. They didn't know what to do. So while the younger faculty were embracing it, we had to recognize that for the older faculty, they weren't being difficult. They were just scared. They did not know how to do this because they so much value the students and want to do a good job. And so to kind of encourage them that, yes, you can do this. How can we help you? And just listen to all of the different challenges that individuals had. Those that were fearful, how could we help and accommodate their needs? Students that were fearful. And how could we run a campus in a way that was safe, but still have students feeling, hey, this is fun. It's fun to be here. How do you do all of that? So those were some of the things that we went through, and just talk about team building. I mean, if you don't have a team in a situation like this, you are not going to survive.
And so coming out of this, I want to pursue two questions. You really have just run the gamut as you have shared your personal experiences, but reflecting on those qualities that upon which you have drawn as women. I believe deliberateness, humility was mentioned, inclusiveness, every one of you, decisiveness, communicativeness. and empathy with the older faculty. I perhaps would be one of those if I were there. All of these have come out, and I'm wondering, perhaps two things here. I want to talk a bit about how you made decisions, what kinds of processes you used, but also perhaps in responding, I'd like you to share whether or not you were conscious of being communicative or deliberate or empathetic, or if it was natural. Please talk with us. Who would like to start with that one? How have you gone about making your decisions? Whether it was on the snap of a finger almost. Each one of you has mentioned you had to just turn and change quickly, and yet you must keep an eye on the future, what comes after. But how did you go about making your decisions?
Maybe I can start and then let the others join in. That's a really good question. I think it's a combination of the two. I think some of it is instinct, and some of it is making sure you're thinking it through. Because when you're moving that quickly, you have to kind of wonder whether you're going to make the right decision instinctively all the time. So you do have to double check. And particularly with communication, in a time like this, the communication that is quick and timely, but human as well, you have to know what you have to think that one through, because your time is so absorbed with making decisions. You have to, that communication bit can be lost if you don't consciously think about it. So for me, it was a combination of the two, and really listening to my team. I mean, that was huge. We had experts in different areas. You had to enable them to go out and find the information and make the decisions and do things, and they needed to know that you would back them in the decisions they made, because you can't possibly do them all yourself. So that capacity to enable others to do the decisions and others to move forward, I think has been really critical.
Yes, yes. Helen, what were your processes?
Well, and also just to follow on with what Andrea said, it's also the reality that you are getting information from a number of different sources and very quickly having to make decisions. Yes. Sometimes the decisions are not appreciated by everybody. So how do you then communicate with that? And this is the direction that we're going. It's very, very difficult, but these are the decisions that have been made, and communicate with those that are not happy as to why the decisions were made, and they could in fact change next week. So yes. That is part of the challenge as well. And certainly for us, faced with the scare of COVID, but then the impact that it had on us institutionally from a financial point of view, with canceling surgeries and all of that impact, we were making then also very, very difficult decisions that affected people's livelihoods. Yes. And that is extraordinarily painful to do, because it certainly is not something that one ever hopes to do in a lifetime, let alone to have a pandemic going on, and you are trying to compassionately deal with layoffs, furloughs, and all of those sorts of things.
What were the structures of your processes for communicating or first making decisions about furloughs and layoffs and so forth?
Yeah, so we actually set up much like Andrea mentioned, we set up what we refer to as the command center. Yes. Key leadership individuals that would meet, and we met every day, sometimes twice a day at the beginning, just to talk through next steps, strategies, and what we were going to do, and then communicate on a daily basis. So we developed, because all of this was related to COVID, but we developed a COVID website that would be pushed out to staff, but then was always there for them to refer to. And then some of the layoffs and furloughs, of course, that was a smaller leadership group to make those decisions, but then the communication had to go out, and that's always challenging.
I want to go to Olive with a slightly different question, but of course continue the references back if you like. I'm wondering, and then coming to each one of you, what lessons have you learned from leading and participating in decision-making during these challenging times? It has been somewhat different for each of you, but I see that same thread running through your experiences.
I'm sure you've all, like myself, have such a tight schedule for the rest of the year and into next year. And what I find in those committees I'm chairing and those projects that I'm leading, I find that I've had to invoke the ability to sort and be efficient.
Yes.
What is the priority here? What is our goal? Let us identify those things and let us find out how most efficiently we can accomplish them. And so I've learned, I think, like my mother did when she had 10 children and had to bring us all up, I've learned to delegate, okay, let's do this. And let us simplify the task. Sometimes you're in committees and they make it seem so difficult. He said, we can simplify this task. So that is what I've learned, to sort, to prioritize, to identify the goals, and then outline clear, simple steps as to how to accomplish those goals, and assign each person. And when we meet to collaborate to the extent to which you're carrying out your assignment and you're not. And I've been doing that, and I find that it's so much less stressful. And because we're now even working online and we're using the OneDrive online, so forth, we're able to do that sort of collaboration. And that's a discovery. I think it's a COVID discovery, because before this time, all these boards and all these projects I'm leading, I've just been stressed out, even though I don't show it. But now I find I'm very relaxed because I'm able to sort, to identify, and to outline the steps in which we will achieve these goals and who will best do this part of the task.
That's a powerful lesson for us. Andrea, let me ask you that same question. What lessons have you learned?
Okay, well, one I kind of refixed in my mind, and one I think I've learned, the one that's kind of come back and I've relearned it, if you like, is just how important it is to believe in people and drive their own potential. People have just risen to the task and done things in amazing ways. I have been able to enable that. And that's been one of the greatest joys of this whole thing, is to actually help enable people to do some things they didn't think they could do. And maybe attached to that, the other thing I have learned is never say never. People who declared, I would never do such and such and such and such. And all of a sudden, they found not only they can do it, but they found delight in doing it. And that has been good too. To kind of bring some, just, I suppose, conclude on that, to just bring lightness to the whole situation. You have to remain hopeful and positive and bring humor, and people to come with you with that. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, and if I may say, I've just learned to laugh through these situations. Always, as you say, humor is very, very important.
Yes.
We should not approach these tasks looking uptight. So
that's
just
right.
Relax. As my son would say, relax, Mom. It's okay.
That's it. That's it. And laughter, as we know, is therapeutic, right?
Yes.
Emotionally, but physically as well. Yes. Helen, what lesson can you add to our list of lessons learned during this time?
Well, probably for me, nimbleness has been key for us. Loma Linda University Health is likely not best known for being incredibly nimble as you try to get everybody moving in the same direction. And this has changed that. It's absolutely changed that. We've had to make decisions at the moment and implement them. And despite some criticism, as I've said already, but to be able to respond to that. And then the second thing for me is something I've always known, but it's been reinforced during this period of time, that is the power of influence.
Yes.
One can accomplish so much more through influence, being present, showcasing what needs to be done, and the fact that we really care on this journey.
Absolutely. These are lessons perhaps that should be highlighted in your next collaborative publication.
Yeah.
You know, as I think Andrea brought this out, and as well, Olive, as you reach back to what your mother did, how your mother managed. Andrea, you said, I relearned a lesson. Helen, you're speaking of those lessons that we learned even before graduate school, right? But perhaps they were pushed back, and perhaps we have operated more from an intuitive level or perspective within highly structured organizations. I think we have been dealing with both. But with this, you have had to draw on the best of your intuition, if we want to call it, or the Holy Spirit speaking in the still small voice in the ear. But also, you've had to pay attention, strict attention. Each one of you has mentioned policies, legislation. So you've had to juggle all of those balls, to do so while moving. Our great-grandson just learned to juggle over the past few weeks, and he's doing the 3 balls. And then he was able to start walking while juggling. And, you know, I just envisioned this. You were there and you just had to dive in and make it work. I want to shift just a little bit, because we're talking about your personal experiences as women in leadership. We recognize that women bring something different to the sphere of influence you mentioned. So I think I'll go with this one first. What does Christianity look like in the boardroom? I've been in a boardroom with each one of you. What does Christianity look like in the boardroom? Should we start with our theologian?
Yeah, that question, I'm still contemplating it. I think sometimes it's a challenge. I think sometimes it is a challenge to balance our commitment and our faithfulness to the gospel with our own egoistic desires and will. And I think that's where we do have the challenge. And many times when I find myself among the top people, and I often feel quite intimidated. But at times I think I have to make my voice heard. I have to bring some kind of level of understanding that we're committed to something higher than ourselves and our ego. But I think that is the biggest challenge I find.
And you're taking us to my next question, but I do want to hear from our other 2 panelists. What does Christianity look like to you in the boardroom?
The first word that comes to my mind is civility and respect, and recognizing the dignity of everybody and their rights to have an opinion. I think that's really, really critical. I think when you say Christianity, that has to be there.
Yes.
We have to value the individuals with whom we disagree. That means that I think several things. It means that when we speak, we do speak to issues not ad hominem, not about the person. We're not there to attack.
Yes.
We are there to focus on the issues about which we feel strongly and believe strongly.
Yes.
And I do think it's an interesting question to me because beyond just that issue, women sometimes speak more tentatively, right?
I was going to go there next, and intuitively, each one of you has just gone in that direction. Why don't we let Helen
hold on that, yes.
the first question, but I'm going to come right back to Olive and to you, Andrea. What does Christianity look like in the boardroom? Just a quick one, and then we do want to go to a conversation about women's voices.
Well, I would echo what Andrea just said with respect. We need to respect what the other person is saying and really listen with the intent of understanding where they're coming from. We have a tendency to disagree immediately when you start to hear something as opposed to really listening and respecting their point of view.
Yes. So, okay, I have a picture before me now. But we are all old enough to know that historically and often currently, women's voices are not heard in decision-making settings. Yes, each one of you is doing a fantastic job in leadership where you are, but sometimes it still happens, and to minorities as well. What can we do? What can you, each individual, do to encourage those in our place of service to hear women's voices, to hear the voices of minorities? And I think minorities in general, but we're having conversations everywhere, all over the world now, that deal with racism and tribalism, casteism, nationalism, and so forth. So in our settings, in our multicultural settings within the church and its institutions and organizations, and I ask yourself the question, what can I do as an individual to encourage others to hear women's voices? Who would like to start?
Well, first and foremost, we must press. We must be courageous. But I'll tell you how I do that, because I'm in theological studies, preaching and teaching. And in my preaching, and especially these days, I'm being called upon to preach on matters of justice and racial equality. But I always bring to the fore that we're not just simply dealing with racial inequality. We're dealing with a culture of domination. Mm-hmm. It's not just one race over the other. At the foundation of it is domination. And I always call attention to the long-standing chronic culture of male domination that we see in society and we see in church. And many times when we listen to the complaints about racism, it becomes very difficult for us to listen to the voices of women who say, my voice is not being heard. Because the tendency is, what more do women want? Yes. When you use language that is male, when I'm in a room and people use male language, mankind, it's as though I do not exist in the room. And so we always have to be conscious and call them back to use language that is inclusive and to use speech that recognizes that there are women in the room. Mm-hmm. And there are women in the world, and that half of humankind is female, while the other half is male. That's a very important, because even in our church, our language tends to suggest that women are the unseen, invisible half of humanity. And that's a project I've taken, a lifelong project, to make sure that we see that half of humanity in our language. Yes. And even in our deliberations.
Bringing awareness. A friend of mine many years ago called it our public service.
Yes. Yes.
Who would like to speak to that one next?
Andrea?
Sure. It's very complex. Yes. I remember sitting on early committees where I often was the only woman. Yes. I was the only woman. And it was challenging to find out how to use your own voice. And I think there's a double thing here. How do you have your own authentic voice that is you as a woman, as I said, with the way I speak, with the way I feel is natural to me. When that language, that tone, that way of approaching it is sometimes unfamiliar and therefore doesn't get heard. So how do you do both those things at the same time? For me, I have found it really important to find a way to be clear enough and direct enough that I am speaking in a way that my voice is heard, but for that not to diminish the values and the driving things that make me authentic with what I'm trying to say. It also means often going and speaking to people off camera and saying, look, I was a bit uncomfortable with this. Or I really think that this came across in this way. And so I think really just not to get discouraged with it. Because it can be just really discouraging. And people, and it's not that our male colleagues they don't know, they aren't understanding sometimes what is really going on in that dynamic, right? And so I think to try and help them understand and unpackage and keep on is quite tiring, but I think that gets somewhere. I think to hit the wall, so to speak. At least for me, that's not my way. I don't feel I achieve anything by hitting the wall. I feel I have to approach it another way.
Excellent. Some of the same concepts coming out. Helen, how about you? What can you do to help women's voices be heard?
Well, and to be perfectly frank, my viewpoint is slightly different because I have operated for my entire career in a female-dominated world.
I expected that from you.
Yes, and so I will frequently hear the opposite. People belong to the Sponge Society, the Society for the Prevention of Nurses Getting Everything. And so, I've had to be very cognizant of it in the other direction. So that, my viewpoint is a little bit different, but I think both Olive's and Andrea's comments were good. You do have to, in the boardroom, speak up, have yourself heard, and then also address if there are things that have come across that make one uncomfortable, and frequently off camera. I don't think it accomplishes very much to do it on camera, as it were.
That's right. Absolutely. I have one or two questions with which to end, but Helen, you bring out a point, and I was wondering if we might go there. We're talking about our interactions with our male colleagues, but Helen, do you find sometimes, even with other women, responding to a woman in leadership is different than for women to respond to a man in leadership? Have you run into that?
Probably.
We won't have to call names, of course.
And yes, I mean, probably that I have experienced some of that, witnessed some of that, but I think in my particular world, it's probably been less of that than, say, Olive or Andrea would find in the worlds in which they are functioning, just because there are so many more women where in my world.
Where you are. That's it. Now, Linda brought out something with which we live constantly, and that is that notion of having been called to the ministries that are God selected and given to us. And for this time, in Earth's history. She mentioned from Esther, who knows, but you have come to the kingdom, to the campus, to the hospital for such a time as this. How do you know your call to leadership? It takes a moment for that one.
Well, let me say for me, and I'm not in the high leadership as you other ladies, you know, I'm not on the top of the totem pole.
You are right there.
But I consider myself a leader in a very significant sense. I think God called me specifically to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I grew up in a very strict, strong Baptist family. My twin brother is a Baptist Union. He was the president of Jamaica Baptist Union. My family is heavily Baptist, but ecumenical. So when I became a Seventh-day Adventist, my mother just thanked God that somebody got me to get baptized as a teenager. And but I was on my way to the University of the West Indies, and a certain set of circumstances, which will take too much time for me to explain, brought me as a teenager to Adventism because I met some teenagers, and I became so enamored with just the message of Adventism, the love, the community. And I had this experience where I saw myself preaching all over the world, and it just left me. I just had that. And I went to the college to study theology, and the department chair was so encouraging. And once I landed on campus, and a lot of the young men found out there was a woman who invaded their club, they were so offended, and they made no secret of telling me how offended they were that I invaded their men's club. And it was at that point when they were calling me and having interviews with me to discourage me, asking me who is going to employ me and so forth, that I decided something is wrong here. It has to change. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to be part of the change. And I've been on that path of seeking change in this church for a long time. And note, I didn't come to make a change in the church because God called me to the church to change me and to transform me. I think my life has taken a path that I'm so happy and grateful to God for calling me to Adventism. But I think also he called me to be here as a testimony that God calls women to.
Absolutely. That's a fine story. Familiar. Yes. Who's next? I see Andrea looking like she's...
I'll go next. You know, I think I would summarize it in the phrase, be still and know that I am God. I think that I have understood my calling by learning to be still enough to talk to God and just let him respond to that. You know, when I was younger, I had a friend, and she was a bird watcher, and we used to go on trips together, and she would go watch birds. And she used to say that I would mushroom. So she called it, she coined the word mushrooming, which meant I would sit on a rock overlooking the ocean and with a mushroom colored hat on, which is why it was called mushrooming. And she would say, I didn't move. She could see me in a telescope for about an hour and I wouldn't move. And that was me learning just how to be still and to pray and to actually untangle all of the different things that were going on in my head, to still myself enough to say yes. And I think that is how, at the turning points in my life, I've constantly gone back to that, being still, listening, because I had no clue at all where my life was going to take me. And it has been an amazing journey that God has had me on. Amazing. And I think each time he has pointed the way, it has been in times of stillness.
Yes. Very good. Helen, my mother was a nurse her entire career. That's all I remember, that she was a nurse and she loved nursing. But at one point, she told me that she wasn't sure if nursing was her first choice. Maybe she wanted to be a physician, but she was discouraged as a young girl, And of course, she embraced nursing, but she wondered. Nursing, obviously, is one of the highest professions, one of the choicest ministries. But, have you ever been challenged, or do you know you were called to nursing?
Interesting, Ella, that you would say that about your mother, because I actually had entertained the idea of medicine as well. But I had two older brothers. Both of them were in medical school, and that costs money. Nursing, you got paid to go to nursing school.
Yes.
So it was actually a fairly easy decision for me at that time to do nursing. I can't say that I have ever regretted it, though. I've never looked back and said, I wonder what it would have been like. So I have felt like my journey from that moment on has been a journey to make a difference, to become, attempting at all times to become more Christ-like in that journey, but to make a difference not only for the patients, but for the staff that I work with.
Yes.
And so that's been my journey. It's never been one of regret as far as my chosen profession goes.
Excellent. It is a good thing to know that you are doing what God wants you to do at the time and in the place where He wants you. And as Andrea said, who would know that we perhaps would be here doing what we do? Nursing is a far cry from being the senior chief leader in a major medical center, university medical center at that. But God has directed our paths, I do believe. There are many, and let me say this because I think it's important that we always acknowledge, and I know your settings. We all have wonderful, very supportive male colleagues. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, because sometimes when we get together and talk, as Olive says, they feel threatened. They don't know what we think of them or what we're cooking up, but we have male colleagues. And I'm sure along the way, each one of you could point out a male mentor. I'm certain each one has had a male mentor. And somehow women, Andrea, you alluded to this, I believe, earlier. As you were talking about the woman's voice, your own voice in the male context, having to speak with a different voice while being true to your own voice. I've always said that I am certainly multilingual, multicultural, and has nothing to do with ethnicity, but being able to operate in and out of the various settings. We have lived through the time in Earth's history when women were trying to be like men, with wearing the male suits and taking on male characteristics, until suddenly we realized that God gave us special gifts to bring to leadership.
Yes.
So what would you say to young women and young men as well, but to young women specifically, who may think while they're mushrooming, Andrea, or walking onto a campus for the first time, or looking for an opportunity, who maybe think that God wants them to become leaders someday? What would you say to them? And perhaps we will begin to wind down and end with this one.
I would purely say to them, if God has given you gifts, then He wants you to just embrace them and use them to the maximum. So go for it.
Go for it.
Yes.
Yes. Someone else. Helen, I see you.
Yep, and I would echo that, to go for it, but also to find yourself a mentor or two or three, people that you admire early on that can really help you in your career trajectory.
And I always point women back to the journey on which women have from the place from where we have come and the journey. Yeah. I always let them see the history. Don't ever take this for granted. You sit in this classroom today and you take it for granted. But not so long ago, there were no women in this classroom. And yes. So, you know, I encourage them to embrace that journey, that we're on a journey of becoming. And you yes. are very important in that journey of becoming. Always embrace yourself. Do not apologize to anyone for who you are and what you aspire to be, because you are created in God's image, just as males are. The culture doesn't make it seem that way, but we are all created in God's image, and God gave them, not him, them dominion. And so you have the gift to do what you want to do. It can be anything. But.
Excellent. Is there a parting word beyond that from anyone? You have covered.
Listen to your mother. I'm serious.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Helen Staples-Evans. I always want to do that. You know that.
Quite right.
Sorry, Helen. Dr. Andrea Luxton, Dr. Olive Hemmings. You women are some of the most powerful women that I know. And I use the term powerful as my recognition that you are connected to our God and that you rely on him for what you do, that you love his people, and that you are comfortable in your own skin. Thank you so much for your contributions to this panel discussion.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
That was so inspiring. I think it will take me a few days to process all of the great advice. Thank you so much for joining us for Vespers. Come back next week when we'll be talking about one of the essential parts of being a leader, and that's taking care of ourselves. Let's bow our heads. Dear God above, thank you so much for the blessings that you give us, for the ability that we have to influence others and therefore be leaders. Thank you that we have many people around us to support us. And when we don't feel their presence, Lord, we know that we always have you encouraging us to be ourselves and find our purpose. Thank you so much. Amen.